the beauty of today is that we have different people coming up, not only from our community, but from other communities where some of these strategies have actually worked. But right now, I would just like to introduce our next speaker, Liz Buckton. She's the Grey County Housing Action Plan, identifying the affordability gap, action items, and opportunities. Now, Liz Buxton is the Senior Policy Planner for Grey County. As a registered professional planner with 17 years of local municipal experience, in 2022 she joined Grey County as Senior Policy Planner and with a project focus on affordable housing. Liz views affordable housing as key community infrastructure, being necessary to support individual well-being and critical to the overall sustainability of our communities. Please welcome Liz Buckton.
Okay, wonderful. So this is perfect height for me, so thank you very much. So I do have some slides to share today, some speaking notes, and it'll be kind of data heavy for the first part, so I will be referring to those notes. What I wanted to say is that there will be an opportunity. I have included my contact information at the end of the presentation. So if folks are wanting to ask additional questions or dive into any of the detail related to some of the information that I'm going to share, do feel free to reach out. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to provide just a quick outline of what I intend to speak to today. So we will talk a little bit about that housing need in Grey County to begin with. We have about 20 minutes together, so I'll do my very best to be concise. Those who know me know that that is a bit of a challenge, so we'll try to keep the words to a minimum. And like I said, there will be that contact information afterwards. We'll talk a little bit about the Housing Action Plan after we talk about the numbers, and then some of those evolving municipal roles and actions that can be undertaken towards affordable housing. Next slide. So I think we've heard already a definition of affordable housing. And so in discussing affordability, what we are using locally is an income-tied definition of housing, generally being 30% of a household's gross income as affordable. And so typically we are kind of in many different models looking at affordable housing. We rely on data available to us through the census. And this is represented here on this slide. So you can see for Grey County overall, our median household income is $78,000 a year. Certainly there is some variance between the different places in the county, with Owen Sound median being lower and Town of Blue Mountains, for example, being quite a bit higher. And then for those individuals, and we think about single-person households, their household income is obviously less. So that's kind of what we're dealing with in terms of pre-tax income of households in Grey County. And what I would note there is, if we take that 30% of household income rule of thumb for affordability and we apply that to that median household income, we end up with a cost of $19.50 a month. Being affordable to those households at the median income. So presumably those with incomes below that median would find $19.50 a month to be unaffordable based on that 30% definition. Next slide, please. So in looking at that income-tied affordability, data is somewhat difficult to come by. We're often waiting for that next iteration of the census. And everyone kind of works the numbers a little bit differently. What I wanted to highlight is a tool that we have discovered that has been prepared to help municipalities in that regard. And leading into the pandemic, the University of British Columbia, with CMHC support, we're looking to develop a methodology using readily available census information that can be repeated for community to community for comparison, and then at each census to allow us for comparisons over time. And they started off with a pilot project and a methodology in Kelowna, and then this year, at the beginning of this year, rolled out a more fulsome portal on their website, which includes a housing need assessment tool, as well as some acquisitions resources and some land selection criteria and tools there as well. So I think we'll be looking a little bit at some of their data, which really kind of packages up that income-tied housing need in a really nice way. And I think the other thing that I just wanted to highlight about this data set that is really interesting is that in the back end of that portal, they have done cross-tabulations, not only with core housing need data, but also with certain demographic and cultural population data. And so it does kind of have an intersectionality element that you can dive into, looking at some cultural and demographic populations that are more significantly represented in the need for affordable housing. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one here, this shows those outputs of the Housing Assessment Resource tool, their need assessment data. And really what it does is it uses that household median income to give us an idea based on the development of income categories. And so what we're learning here at the left-hand side is which income category our households may fall into as calculated based on a percentage of the area median household income. In the next column over, that speaks to the percentage of Grey County households that have incomes within each of those categories, what the range of income would be for each of those categories, and then an associated shelter cost. That would be the maximum shelter cost based on that 30% rule for affordability. And so I'll just work through a line there for an example. So for very low income, that represents households earning 20% or less of the area median household income, 2% of our population in that grouping earning generally less than about $16,000 a year, and they would be looking for affordable shelter cost of $390 a month or less. Those folks would be largely represented in our social and transitional housing, for example. In low income, 17% of our households are in that range. That income range extends up to about $39,000 a year, so it does capture those minimum wage full-time workers as an example. And so in terms of affordability, they're looking up to around $1,000 a month for what they would need to have affordable shelter, taking 30% of their income. Next slide, please. So the HEART data is really useful to understand the income distribution across our community and how that relates to affordability. But I think it's more meaningful if we understand how that relates to our supply, right? And so this is the deficit output from that HEART tool, which really tries to kind of take that income grouping information, it marries it together with core housing need data from the census, and identifies for us those folks that are living in our community, paying a rent in our community, but that would not have other options if they needed to vacate the unit that they're in. I think really important here to note as well, from a recruitment standpoint too, if we are trying to bring folks into roles that are in that $30,000 to $60,000 range, they too may be having challenges finding units because they are included in this core housing need and so would be unable to afford kind of the average rental rate locally. So for Grey County overall, this model estimates about 2,700 unit deficit, really kind of at that low and moderate income household range, where we would be looking at those $1,000 to $1,500 a month rental rates for those populations. And I just wanted to see if I had anything flagged here. Yeah, so I think that represents that deficit piece for those households in our community. That what options are available to them for housing. We've got quite a few folks that would not have a great deal of options available to them if they needed to move. But we are also forecasting growth, population growth, and employment growth in our community. So when we're talking about targets, we also need to be considering not only the deficit, but also those growth projections. Next slide, please. So Grey County does have a growth management role as the upper tier municipality, and we did have growth management figures calculated through Hemson Consulting. That is now embedded within our county official plan, and we've been bringing those numbers forward into a number of the local official plans through their ongoing update processes recently. This slide shows kind of the new households, I guess, expected by 2031 and 2046 over our 2021 baseline. So we are looking by 2031 of adding about 5,600 households, and by 2046, approximately 12,000. Our current policy target in the official plan is that 30% of new housing be affordable. But I think, of course, the challenge is that both financially and from a tools perspective and teeth perspective in our policies and approaches, we don't really have the mechanisms in place to mandate those that supply come online. And so I think that's really part of the challenge that we're looking at is, how do we produce that scale of housing at that price point without, the really firm tools to require that be constructed? And where does that money come from, even if we were able to require that those units were to be constructed? So I think, while supply is generally required to address forecasted growth, as well as some latent demand that we understand is present, there are those pricing targets and sensitivities with that supply so that it will adequately meet the needs of our low and moderate income households. And we are seeing just that the costs of housing creation have escalated quite significantly. And so that's quite a large challenge. I think a key focus of the Housing Action Plan that the county has prepared, and I'll speak to next, is really answering that question of how do we facilitate the creation of this targeted housing in addition to that general growth supply that we require over the same time frame. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'm often asked for a total target. What's the number? And so that is challenging because I think, as you bring new supply on, there is a filtering effect that typically happens in terms of pricing. But I've really kind of looked to the economists out there to try and kind of help answer that question. And so if I had to offer a concise statement, what I would say is that, we have a deficit of approximately 2,700 affordable units to address across the county, and we expect to additionally require about 30% of new development driven by population and employment growth to come online at affordable rates. I would say, and Marilyn, I think, spoke to that idea of the social housing waitlist. So we have definitely seen that grow. That figure of Grey County households on our social housing waitlist was about 600 prior to the pandemic. And as of last month, we're at 1,500 households on that list. Those represent Grey County households living here today, looking for more affordable housing. We have that population component there as well, the 3,600 units, but I think that 1,500 unit probably tucks in under what is already reported in the 2,700 through the HART unit. So that would really be the number that I would highlight there. But that is in addition then to that mix of housing, as Yvonne had spoken to. And so we are really looking for some targeted affordable units, but we still do need that range of price and type of housing too. Next slide, please. Okay. So I think really quickly here, I just wanted to note that we have to temper our expectations to some degree regarding those new supply considerations. Like I said, we do expect some degree of filtering of price as we get new units coming online. However, what I understand is that filtering can't meaningfully happen if there is a significant difference between supply and demand for those units, particularly rental. There is a suggestion through the various economist reports out there right now that we will see continued price escalation, and that what new unit supply will do is help to reduce the rate of that escalation, not necessarily bring prices down. I think, like I said before, that construction cost piece is really substantial and presents a really main consideration of the challenge ahead. A number of the projects that we have been looking at from recent public examples are seeing kind of unit cost in the $350,000 to $400,000 range. And so that is a challenge, right? How do you build something that costs $350,000 or $400,000 and offer it at $700 a month, right? And we need to figure out the math there. Next slide, please. So the county has prepared a housing action plan. We are looking to try and kind of get at that challenge, again, through the systems lens that the Institute is using as well. This plan identifies actions to streamline our processes, to build our capacity, and to grow our affordable unit supply. Largely, the actions are focused on the municipal sphere of control, but there are elements of kind of the sphere of influence, so how all of those relationships and levers within the broader community that we can collaborate or partner around. But I think, really those core municipal operational considerations will come into play within that plan, looking at our various policies, tools, our processes around planning applications, and then all of the ways that we intersect financially with those applications as well. Next slide, please. As I noted, the systems view, so the actions identified within that housing action plan include policy considerations, financial resource flow considerations, practices, relationships, as well as kind of the mental models that hold our current thinking around affordable housing in place. We are looking at a collaborative focus, so there is a leadership role for Grey County identified within that plan, but really I think those actions would be for all of us to entertain. And we do think that that will be a living document and intend to come back to that and pivot and update as we go. The issue is in that same boat, changing as we go, so we'll need to change too. Next slide, please. I think really what I want to highlight here is that there is that wide range of factors. So much of what affects the affordability of housing is outside of our scope. And so that is humbling and part of the reality of the situation. There is no one silver bullet solution, but many actions that we can take to shift the system. Collaboration and creativity are really going to be important. And I think we've certainly started some of the conversations with the development and nonprofit industry, but I really think there are far greater solutions to come from collaboration and discussion and relationship building with those sectors to help inform not only our future actions at the county and local municipalities, but our advocacy work as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so just really quickly, I wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of what's in that plan. So there are a number of different initiatives underway or in some level of progress. Currently, my focus has been getting the community of practice up and running. So we do now have a table, and we're coming together between the county and local municipalities on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, depending on schedules. And we will be moving into discussions around data in December, getting ready for next year so that we can be kind of capturing all of the year-end reporting to inform our progress. We've also been undertaking a planning efficiencies review, and that's on the heels of some legislative changes, many legislative changes that we've been navigating recently. And so we have been working to integrate our new ecologists at the county into the planning development process, and working with each of the municipalities in terms of how they are updating their processes. And then finally, my focus has been around surplus lands. That was initially what I was brought onto the county on a contract role to work on. And we will be moving forward with some priority investment and other considerations in a report to County Council in the coming months. Next slide, and I'll wrap it up. I'm getting the sign here. So I guess really, I wanted to speak to that idea of the municipal role, and I have had the conversation with a number of local municipal council members. There hasn't always been kind of an acceptance that there is a local municipal role in housing, and I think that's shifting. But I think we can kind of start with why. So our why really as municipal organizations is towards that community well-being. Next slide, please. And I think, and it is my opinion, and I think that's shared by others, that the Planning Act role really has that housing piece embedded into it. And through that Planning Act role and the administration of the development process, there is very clearly a role for municipalities stipulated within the Planning Act. The county, of course, has a role as housing manager, but I think really the focus there is on that deeply affordable, subsidized housing, as well as shelter provision and homelessness, which I can tell you will be taking a much greater focus for the housing department in terms of where their eyes and dollars need to be going right now. There is this growing recognition of housing as key community infrastructure. And so I think we being here today, having this discussion kind of leads from that idea that we all understand that there is an importance to it, because how do you run a community, like practically, if people don't have a place to live, right? And there is a broad range of actions that can be undertaken, and we'll be working on those together. Next and final slide, please. So I wanted to highlight within the toolkit on the Institute Southern Georgian Bay's website, we have put together, myself with some help from wonderful other authors, kind of a point form list of low-hanging fruit or actions that municipalities could be looking at in terms of defining their local role. So I will send you to the toolkit because it is quite a fulsome list. I also encourage you to read that housing action plan that's been put out by the county. We are going to be working through kind of the next phases of implementation and really detailing all of the rollout of that plan and the dollars that might go with that. But there's lots of information available currently, so I'll direct you to that, and certainly happy to have further conversations if there are questions. And then finally, just the very final slide, if you won't mind, my contact information is there. So thank you very much. Enjoy the day.